always do with Pledge of Allegiance. I love it. I just heard Director Trione ask, do the kids still say that in school every day? Yes, they do. And I think I explained once, right after September 11th, I sponsored a law that required Illinois high schools to say it as well. We were one of only 3 states following September 11th that did not say the Pledge of Allegiance in Illinois high schools. So today, my daughter, I'm sure, at Hinsdale Central High School said the Pledge of Allegiance, I hope. So, Illinois is with the rest of the nation, and we say the Pledge of Allegiance to begin every school day, which we should. As Director Friga will say amen to. Audrey, Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Director Anderson? Director Buchanan?
Here.
Director Colson?
Here.
Director DeWitt?
Here.
Director Durrani?
Here.
Director Fraga?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Here.
Director Hobson?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Here.
Director McGallis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Here.
Director Payne? Here. Director Ross?
Here.
Director Totten?
Here.
Director Triani?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Here.
We have a quorum of 13 present with 1 absent.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, thanks everybody for your excellent attendance. And again, it never ceases to impress me how we all sit in on all the committee meetings as well. So I really thank you for your attention and preparation for the meetings all the time. The minutes from our July 16th, 2015 meeting. Are there any questions, comments, addition to those? If not, can I have a motion and a second? We approve those minutes. Director Ross moves that we approve the minutes from July 16th, 2015, seconded by Director Friga. And let's take a roll call on that so we have a real baseline roll call for others, if we could,
Okay.
Audrey.
Director Buchanan?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Aye.
Director DeWitt?
Yes.
Director Durrani?
Aye.
Director Fraga? Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Hobson?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Payne? Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Totten?
Aye.
Director Triani?
Aye.
Chairman Dillard?
Yes.
13 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. So those minutes are approved. Next is item 4 on our agenda. That's the public comment section. There are no scheduled speakers today, so we'll move right on to Director Redden's report, our Executive Director, item number 5, Leanne.
So to pick up where Director Buchanan left off, as of today, the state owes us $291.6 million. So, I didn't do my, there's the number. As you can see, slightly up from July. On a brighter note, the chairman and I joined the CTA president and CDOT's commissioner, Rebecca Scheinfeld, at a press conference held by Mayor Emanuel on Tuesday. It was held at the CTA 74th Street Bus Garage. It promoted CTA's plans for faster bus service on Ashland and Western Avenues. The CTA plans to reintroduce, God, I can't speak, the rush hour express service on both of those routes. One of several ways that they are expecting to reduce travel times in those corridors by up to 22 minutes. So that's some pretty significant travel time savings for people. The mayor thanked the RTA twice during his remarks, and again, it's sort of showing again the good coordination and cooperation amongst our agencies. It was RTA's work in partnering with this project that brought $36 million in federal congestion mitigation and air quality monies grant to our region. $4 million of those monies are being used to do program management, the overarching engineering and design, and a coordinated implementation program around what we call transit signal priority. Through this TSP, buses are able to communicate with signal controllers, the traffic lights out there, for example, to hold a green light a little bit longer or to shorten up a red light a little bit longer to allow buses to stay on schedule, keep them moving through the system and sort of reduce some of those bottlenecks. The RTA agreed to commit about half of those federal funds to the CTA's overall program. So it really improves, as I said, bus reliability and has really very minimal impacts on the rest of the traffic operating in around the system. This was a CTA mayoral press conference, but it should be noted that we are also working very closely with PACE on TSP the program as well. As I mentioned, we're taking a regional approach to this. So CTA is doing a series of corridors in the city, and PACE is looking at key corridors in the suburban area. One of the reasons for our involvement is to make sure that there is interoperability amongst these systems, that they can talk to each other, and that there's sort of some uniformity across the region. It's just another example of our regional coordination and cooperation. So, onto the Springfield situation. As we sort of talked about a little bit, the budget impasse continues, and we are still without a state fiscal 2016 year budget. We continue, though, to receive our PTF state match monies. As many of you probably realize, that this is a continuing appropriation, that monies still flow to us, even though the state has not approved a budget. We recently received $34 million installment to our skip bond reimbursement from the state for fiscal year 2015 also, and we expect to receive the remainder of that skip reimbursement money in the next couple of months. We were just informed yesterday that we will be receiving the first pieces of the FY 2015 reduced fare reimbursement and ADA funding reimbursement. Now, again, this is just for 2015. They haven't caught up yet. But again, sort of giving some context for why we are also making certain assumptions in our outlook budget year planning. $17.5 million for the reduced fare reimbursement for July through September 2014, and about just over $3.8 million in ADA funding are those dollar amounts that we're expecting to receive. And as I said, we hope to receive those actually by tomorrow. They've notified us it's in the system, and we'll actually receive cash in hand, if you will, tomorrow. On August 3rd, the governor did sign, so there is other things happening in Springfield. The governor did sign House Bill 2685, which was a bipartisan bill that was an initiative introduced for the RTA. It extended the sunset provision on the RTA's $400 million short-term borrowing abilities. As you know, based on the number I just previously reported in the earlier slide, the shortfall that we have, the delays in payments from Springfield, we unfortunately use those monies to sort of offset those delays and essentially float cash to the service boards while we're waiting on those monies to catch up. So they extended that short-term borrowing authority from 2016 through to 2018. So that was a good success story for us. In 2008, the General Assembly passed this extension due to that state inconsistency, and we use it occasionally while we're waiting for those monies to come through. As a result of the state budget crisis, IDOT has, I think we've reported on this to the board before, suspended advancing a portion of the state bond-funded capital program. So only those projects that are actually active or underway will receive funding, but that has also got a little bit of a caveat on that, predicated by the ability or cash flow ability. IDOT does not have sufficient funds to guarantee full funding of all of those projects. If the budget resolution is not achieved, some of these projects will need to be formally suspended. Over 20 projects that had not yet begun as of July had been put on hold. So there are some very real impacts to the budget impasse with us. Moving on to the federal side, some of you may have noticed that there was a quick passage of what is being called the DRIVE Act in the Senate just before Congress adjourned for its August recess. But it was pretty surprising to many of us who kind of watched this stuff. It does give us some indication that senior members in potentially both chambers do have some interest in looking to pass a long-term bill before the end of this year. The DRIVE Act is a $341 billion six-year bill that is funded, though, only for 3 years. The public transportation funding, though, in that bill that passed out of the Senate, did represent about a 12.7% higher increase in funding over the current fiscal year. The House is going to draft its version of a surface transportation bill in August and September. At least that's what we're hearing. We do know staff are actually working on that, so we'll see how that plays out. There's a hope that it'll probably pass through or could pass through the T&I committee sometime in September or October. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, we're hearing he wants to get a bill done so that they don't have to worry about this issue as the session progresses. Also, in July, the Senate Finance Committee passed a 2-year extension of the tax extenders bill. We've talked about this before you. That includes the transit benefit parity piece in that legislation. Again, these are some signs of progress, though nothing is final. There's a lot more work on the House side to get done, and when Congress returns from its August recess, it's going to be, as they're sort of saying, a race to the finish line with some other competing things. We've got annual budget and appropriation processes that kick into gear. We've got long-term surface transportation bill, which I was talking about. We've got that not crazy idea, but that very challenging topic of raising the debt ceiling, as well as other foreign policy issues. So there's a lot on the agenda. We're hopefully going to be a big part of that, and hopefully something will actually come to fruition. Related to our federal agenda, with our Getting America to Work coalition, we're working with partners across the country. We had mentioned in an earlier board meeting that we had asked the members of the coalition to write up anecdotes and information they had received about sort of telling the story about what this lack of funding means to all of us in the transportation space. This was really well done, I think, and good participation by all the coalition members. We have compiled a lot of that information. We're using it specifically, peer-to-peer and with specific members of Congress to help tell the story. We're also going to be using it sort of in a rolled-up fashion to, again, in sort of broader lobbying efforts across Congress. And really pushing them in that conversation about the long-term transportation funding. We did get some good coverage out of some of the sort of inside Beltway publications like Politico, pretty influential morning publication that legislators and staffers read every morning. So some good coverage in there to sort of continue to sort of beat that drum on the issues specifically in the transit space. Something that we are going to talk about actually later on in the board agenda, but I just kind of wanted to take just a minute or two to touch on this. Chicago's Union Station is a transportation hub and a historic facility, and really a gateway to the city in our region. Ridership through that, or use through that, passengers through that terminal every day actually exceeds the amount of people that come in and out of Midway on a daily basis. So it truly is a transportation hub. 6 metro lines meet there. Many people who also use Amtrak services and intercity trains come through that area, as well as 16 CTA connecting bus lines. And actually, there's a Pace Bus route that one of the bus-on-shoulder routes that actually comes from the southwest burbs actually has a terminus point at that location as well. As many of you who actually either do or know people who ride Metra, Union Station is in some significant need of capital repairs. The chairman himself has spoken about several of those situations that he has personally experienced in the aftermath of flooding and some other situations. The City of Chicago really led the charge initially on this and developed the Union Station Master Plan jointly with the full several agencies within the city, Amtrak, Metra, and RTA. Now we're really ready to move into the first phase of implementation of some of the projects identified in that master plan. The overall plans for Union Station kind of have 2 key components. There's the transportation improvements, which is the sort of side of the fence that we're playing on, and then there's the broader real estate development opportunities in and around there. As I said, we're focusing on the transportation side, but Amtrak has some big plans for sort of redeveloping in and around that station area to also potentially realize more monies that could be filtered back into that project over time. Some of the upgrades on the transportation side will be for the purpose of enhancing customer convenience and comfort, while others will very much address very real safety concerns and the future improvements there. The physical infrastructure improvements will include widening platforms, adding elevators, modernizing the concourses, etc. Each of the named stakeholders will be looking to pledge some financial support to this ongoing project going forward. This next phase that we are talking about, and hopefully in a couple of months, we'll be bringing you a more formal action to take through some either an ordinance or an MOU or something with us. But us partnering with Amtrak, Metra, and the City of Chicago to do this next phase of planning and preliminary engineering design work. The project piece of work would cost about $6 million. Amtrak will plan to kick in about $3 million. We would like to pledge $1.5 million towards that project as well. It truly is a regional project. It benefits, it is a gateway. It benefits the downtown business community. It's in the city of Chicago. Metra is the largest tenant in that space. The majority of people coming through there, though, are suburban riders. So, if there was one example of the quintessential, regional project, I personally believe this is a very good example of that. And I'm excited about our potential engagement in this. I mentioned the City of Chicago will also be providing funding. We're going to have a resolution today later on in the board, and that is really just to sort of give our initial commitment and stating our sort of interest and support for the project while we further develop the more detailed formal pledge of dollars to this. And we really look forward to continuing that partnership with Amtrak, Metra, and the city going forward. And then finally, one last point I just wanted to highlight. The chairman mentioned this already, and last month we did a resolution honoring the passage of the Americans with Disability Act and the 25th anniversary. We participated in the Disability Pride Parade with the service boards. There's a couple of photos up there. We also did quite a lot of media coverage about accessibility of the region's transit system. Letters to the editor by the chairman was published by the Daily Herald. And Michael Vanderkreek from our mobility management team actually did some really good media with WBEZ Radio and WCIU TV as well. So I think we got good coverage, and there were some really good events that we participated in. With that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Yes, Director Totten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leanne, in reference to the press conference regarding the express bus, if I recall correctly, a number of years ago, there was a similar experiment either on Roosevelt or Cermak Road going east and westbound. It was an east and west, to have the buses control the signals so that you would have faster bus transit. Did that project ever take hold? If so, how's it doing? If not, why didn't it happen?
So actually, I think what you're recalling was the RTA took some leadership in actually would have been a much bigger project than just TSP. TSP could have been an element of that, and that was really more looking at a bus rapid transit corridor with a lot more infrastructure improvements, dedicated busways, those kinds of things. We did that work. It wasn't throwaway work. We actually partnered with PACE on a lot of that, did some initial planning, some market research, and really started to talk with people along that corridor. PACE has gone on to identify, and we can get you more information on, PACE has its series of corridors that they are looking to move forward on in the TSP and sort of the enhanced bus service realm. Milwaukee actually has sort of risen to the top as their first corridor that they are going to focus on for a variety of different reasons. But they do have several corridors in the mix. And I don't know, Jessica, do you know what the other corridors are on the PACE list? I can't. Dempster's another one. So the work that we were sort of initially proposing would have been a much bigger project. We would have had to go after federal New Starts money. And at that time, while that's a good foundation of planning work, it's still a corridor of interest. We realized that we had a lot of other competing capital needs out there, and we sort of decided to collectively sort of take some of the smaller incremental approaches and delivering some things in some areas where we already had secured some federal monies to realize some of those benefits by some sort of lower level enhancements, but delivering them out in the existing system quickly.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't much difference than what the CTA is proposing now on Ashland and Western. This was still just a bus going along.
It would have had some of the elements that we're talking about on the Western and the Ashland corridors, but the work we were doing with PACE actually looked at potentially a completely dedicated bus lane, more of like the inline station platforms. You may be thinking about Ashland was a corridor or is a corridor that the CTA has on the books as a potential BRT corridor for the future also, which would have had could potentially have more of a dedicated lane and a lot more significant capital investment. They are, again, sort of looking to develop some of these short-term benefits and elements now while they continue to look at and plan.
I don't think Roosevelt was dedicated lanes. I think it was similar to the proposal that CTA is talking about right now on Ashland and Western.
We never got to the point of a specific project. We were looking at concepts. And it was a portion of that was looking at we were looking at a range of options, but one of those was the opportunity to consider more of a dedicated lane in some of those portions.
And it did not happen because of, I missed that.
Well, it was never a real project. I mean, we were in the very preliminary planning stages, looking at was there a market, what was the potential, what some high-level order of magnitude costs would be. And when we looked at it, it would have to go and compete at the federal level for New Starts monies. And the sort of collective consensus was we weren't really ready for that at this point. We were able to secure this $36 million for TSP, which is more of a technology improvement. Let's do some of those smaller scale enhancements, deliver what we can in a shorter term period while we look at the longer term.
Thank you.
Thanks. And on the Ashland Avenue, that this is going to be done over a couple of years, so it's done in stages by pieces. The magnitude is, the Ashland bus route number 9. That's our busiest route. That is 50,000 people a day. That's a 10 million rider a year route, and Western Avenue is also got to be in our top 3 routes. So these are 22 minutes a day, real improvements over the next couple of years that'll serve, more than 10 million people on that one route a year. So this is clearly a priority. And again, the mayor thanked us profusely for our work and leadership in this. And for you city members, the very first question he got was, does this put BRT on the back burner? And he said, does this kill the BRT up and down Ashland? And he said, no, but we've got to find funding to do BRT if we're going to do it. So he didn't kill it, but this clearly is a great improvement right off the bat. 22 minutes a day, when you compound it with how many days people are going to work or school, is really a quality of life improvement. That's pretty magnificent. And these are 2 workhorse routes, so clearly the right priorities, I think, for us. Who else had a question? Yes, Director Melvin.
Hi, Union Station. It's a beautiful building, and it sounds like a great project. I was very excited to hear about it. So $6 million is the initial amount, asking us for 1.5. Who's going to put up the rest of the other 1.5?
So at this point, for this phase of planning and design, it would be 3 by Amtrak, 1.5 from us, 1 from Metra, and $1 million from Metra, and about $500,000 from the city of Chicago to this point. I will say that there are some other concurrent projects going on that both Metra and the city have invested in, actually in some cases with IDOT, looking at sort of rail access even outside of the actual physical station area. So there's lots of pieces to all of this. This is going to be a multi-year ongoing project and lots of different elements. This is sort of the first phase that we're getting engaged with.
And how many phases do you think there'll be, or do you think there'll be many other requests for additional funds? It's a very, very exciting project, and it's worth a lot. It's sort of been a dead space, so it's nice to think of it really coming to life. But just
I
some
think
estimate.
We will at some point look to come back with more of an overarching sort of financial plan around the whole Union Station. This was a project that sort of the city and Amtrak and Metro were already sort of advancing, and we actually got ourselves involved in it. We had been involved in the master planning phase and sort of had stepped away for a little while, and I sort of pushed, and the chairman actually was a big sort of supporter of at least the concept. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to make some big impacts.
On Union Station, if any of you travel and you get to see Grand Central Station, you go to Denver or go to Philadelphia, or DC even, look at what the potential is. And a couple of other things, air quality. The air quality at Union Station, that's one of the things that must be improved. Senator Durbin, to his credit, has been a leader in trying to get, with the situation that we have today, the air quality is improved, but it is still in significant need of improvement. But what, aside from my selfish reasons, who ride through that station every day and trudge through water and have rain pour down on your head and everything else and breathe that air, when you look at why you would do this, aside from safety and the convenience of the commuters, the real reason that you do it is to have that West Loop just take off economically. The numbers that the mayor's office has in the city of Chicago are into the billions in terms of what it would drive economically. And what you want is you want Union Station to become a destination for people that don't even take mass transit to have dinner there, to have the kinds of restaurants they have in Grand Central in New York, where it becomes the hub of incredible, explosive economic development. And so the potential's big. And then last but not least, and it was a gentleman from the Illinois State Chamber of Commerce who said, if you're going to be a world leader, Chicago, in transit, that includes freight, that includes O'Hare and Midway, and our great highway system. It includes rail passengers, and that includes commuters. And Union Station is, I wouldn't quite say it's an embarrassment, but it's borderline embarrassment for a city that bills itself as the world or Midwest transportation leader to have this wonderful facility sitting there, historic, with more people through there every day than go through Midway Airport. This is, I watch people get off the city in New Orleans. I watch people come in on rail on Amtrak. And it's an embarrassment as a Chicagoan to watch these people come into this facility, knowing that they've seen other places. And this is just part of a global picture of economic development for the West Loop, but also our reputation as the transportation leader in America. If they have Union Station be in that kind of repair, we've got to do something. So. Who else is around the horn here? Yes, Director Freeman.
Leanne, for information purposes, how much is the interest we paid to cover the state tardiness in paying us on time?
We have provided before. I don't have it here with me now, but we're carrying we're carrying 135 million in working cash notes, and that we have active right now. We also are carrying commercial paper that we're not actually tapping into, but we needed it because we have tapped into it up to almost 380 million in its heyday. So I'll have to give you, what I have it is, together it's about, all debt service is about 220 million a year, but that includes our bonds. So I'd have to give you just the short-term borrowing part. I don't have it here. I'll have to get back to you.
That'd be a number. We should make sure we all see that. I'd like to see that. And I do want to give a shout out to Jeremy LaMarche, our governmental affairs liaison. He did yeoman's work in a Springfield environment that was tedious this year. It's the best way to explain it, of walking our bill to give us financial flexibility through the legislature, and then getting it signed by Governor Rauner. Jeremy did yeoman's work with B and Leanne's assistance in getting us this key tool, because it is no small feat these days to get anything done in Springfield, especially something that has a financial bearing. So, Jeremy, nice work. Any other questions on Union Station or anything else? What else do you have, Leanne?
That's it. I'm done.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Procurement report, can I ask about that?
Please.
And I probably missed this, the Freedman Development Advisors? Was that just an already contracted amount to be paid? It says,
Item number 7?
yeah.
We're getting there next.
Okay,
Or
thanks.
soon.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we need to do is to adopt item 6, which is on the consent item or calendar, as we legislators like to call it, and that would be 6A and 6B. One is the resolutions certifying the financial results from the second quarter, and 6B is an ordinance establishing the estimates of the amounts available to the service boards for the next operating budgets and the recovery ratios and the preliminary capital programs for 2016 through 2020. These are the two easy consent ones. Can we take them on, was there leave to take them on one roll call?
We need a motion and a second.
Yes. If there's no objection to that, we'll do 6A and 6B together. Can I have a motion and a second? Moved by Director Melvin, seconded by Director Michael Lewis. Is there leave for the attendance roll call on these consent items? Seeing no objection, leave is granted and it will be
13 ayes,
so
1
reported.
absent.
Thank you. Now, on the item 7, which is the approval of the contract and procurement item as it appears on our board agenda, and this is an ordinance authorizing a contract for interagency signage, engineering, and construction management. Leanne, is that yours?
Yeah, well, I mean, we typically with contracts, if people have questions, we just are available to answer any specific questions that anybody might have.
Yes, Director Colson.
In 2010, you first proposed these signage going up in four locations, right? And you know that's become kind of a burr in my boot. If you, it was $500,000, and it was signage at 4 locations. And I asked if the signs were made out of platinum or, you know, prices and so forth. And since then, after that, I got a nice tour.
Can you turn your microphone on?
Oh, another $800,000 for 19 locations. And that number gets it up to about $1.3 million, and it does not even include the fabrication and the installation, which are going to cost more. You know, where I come from, that's a lot of money, and I'm looking at some of the locations like Waukegan. Waukegan has a nice metro station and a pace stop right outside it, and there's already a sign up there saying pace stop. I just don't, I can't get my arms around why it costs so much for these signs. And maybe you can reassure me, what are we getting for all this money? This sounds incredibly expensive to me, $1.3 million for signs.
Well, Director, the good news on this one is that for $800,000, we're actually doing 19 sites. So your comments last time were heard, and we worked really hard to negotiate with our vendor. This is for the design of the sites. We looked at a couple of different things when we were reviewing their proposal. We looked at, we actually sat down and looked at their hours and thought about, does this make sense? I'm an engineer, so we looked down at their hours and said, this does make sense what they're proposing to us. We cut as much fat out of it as we could. We looked at the previous contract, as I mentioned, and compared that to what we'd gotten before. We also talked a bit to Metra and to CTA about their signage programs to see if this was reasonable. Kevin can talk a little bit more about that. But we really left feeling like this is a good estimate for what we want to do. You know, it's a good opportunity for RTA to do something that's really kind of in between all the service boards. It's an interagency thing. It's something that as a rider, as a new person to the region, it is actually really not always obvious how to get around these interagency sites. So I think it's really nice for us to have something out on the street for people to see. So, Kevin, did you want to add to that at all?
Yes, Director, a couple of things. First off, at Waukegan, the pace stop really isn't right next to the Metro station. The UP station is down in a trench where the tracks are. You have to cross over 137, go up to Sheridan Road, north of Washington Street, and you have 8 routes there. And that's the crux of the program, of that it's to knit together the system as one, where you have, if you're at pace stop, you know where to go to Metro. If you're at a Metro stop, there's adjacent CTA stop, you know to go there. And so for this, with the costs, it's about 30%. This is, in general, when you're doing construction, this is for engineering, and these folks are going to, for this contract, they're actually going to help put together the procurement packages. They're going to do the true engineering, so that, for instance, they do wind loads, so a sign doesn't fall down. Or if we have a station where there's a different type of platform, like recently, we meet with Metro monthly on this project, and if there's a different type of base of a platform, that something would have, the signs would have to be engineered a separate way for that. So they're bringing in an expertise that we do not have here. It has an expertise that, in some ways, it's complementary to the service boards, too. of that. They come in, and then they will work with the service boards on that. So again, this is 30% cost of the whole project, and that's why it's rather high. I mean, it's a $4 million grant, which is 90% federally funded. So we think that this will go a long way, and we do manage these contracts very well. I mean, so far this project in many ways is coming in lower than budget. Like, for instance, our maintenance of our signs last year were just a fraction of what we budgeted because we managed the contract very tightly. As Jessica said, on this one, we negotiated the cost down quite a bit.
And this is a not to exceed amount over a 5-year period, and we only pay for what we actually do and use.
Okay, what are the fabrication installation going to cost? Do we know?
In general, those as we looked at the pilot sites, the fabrication costs again that will most likely be lower than this. But again, I can't guarantee that because it's according to how we do these signs. For instance, in discussions with Metra, we are doing them right now as we call bundles. Right now, we're going into design of the first phase, which are all the Metra stations. We've spoken to engineers, we've spoken to manufacturers, and they were saying it's regular bulk. The more we do, the cheaper the manufacturer will be. We know that in general, the manufacturer of these signs are going to be lower than this cost right here, because that's just the norm of the industry. Of that, a lot of upfront costs, your manufacturer is going to be lower.
Well, and as Kevin said, I mean, this is actually a construction project. So you're talking about this design and engineering work. That represents about 30% of the overall $4 million. So the remaining sort of 60-70% will be the actual fabrication and installation.
Maybe part of the problem, we ought to get Pace to stop right at the Waukegan Metro Station. I wasn't aware that they were that far away. I mean, that's pretty silly. People have to walk way up the hill.
And again, that's the crux of this project. And the communities really like this project out of our pilot sites, for instance, at the city of Joliet. When the new Metro platform opened, we spent a lot of time with staff going out there at the behest of City of Joliet, at the behest of Metra, with Metra staff and Amtrak to totally re-sign 3 blocks away to actually get the Pace customers who used to have a 1-2 block walk to the Metra. Now if it's inaccessible, if you need a wheelchair, now it's a 4 block walk from the Pace. So that's where our project falls in between getting the Metra Pace customers and CTA to Metra.
All right. Well, thank you for answering my concerns.
Yes, Director Lewis.
Do we know the DBE component, who those subcontractors are?
Yes, we do know the subcontractors of this, and they're a local firm. And the DBE is 34%.
Would it be possible to get their names at a subsequent time?
Yeah, we'll get you those names right after the board meeting.
Thank you.
We'd look for a recommendation from the board.
So when you're dealing with these vendors and engineers and others, I mean, this is to the staff, I would clearly tell them that you've got a board of directors, and it's more than just Director Colson, that is really pressure sensitive here. And I would use the board, and just say, look, this came up at a board meeting, and and you're under immense pressure to hold these costs down. And that's our job is to admonish you, and I would take it back to the folks that you're negotiating with here. Yes, Director Hobson.
A question that came up based on Director Colson's question. The Pace stop was quite a ways from the Metro stop. Did you say in your example down in Joliet that you actually moved the Pace stop to be closer to the Metro stop? Was that part of your project?
No, it was totally separate from our project, but because we had signs down there, we had to make changes to accommodate it. As part of the high-speed rail, the Metro platform used to be adjacent, both this Rock Island and the Heritage Corridor were adjacent to what was the Joliet Union Station. As part of that, the Metro platform was moved east of the crossover. So now, to board this platform, you have to walk an additional 2 to 3 blocks. The accessible pathway, because the elevator that was put in with that platform is an extra 2 blocks further east. So because we actually sign for an accessible pathway that anybody with a wheelchair or mobility, who's mobility limited can use it, we had to work with the City of Joliet and Metra to actually sign an extra 2 blocks to the elevator. Now, if you're wondering, that's only a temporary situation for the next 2 years or so, because the City of Joliet is currently designing a new station that will then have an elevator 2 blocks west, which will actually put people a little bit further than the original situation, but still it's going to be 2 blocks closer than the current situation is.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, common sense should enter in, and if we're in a situation like Waukegan where it's far away, could there or should there be a discussion that says, hey, maybe this can be a little closer and we can resolve this?
We leave those discussions up to the service boards and the local municipalities. In that case, it would be PACE and the city of Waukegan, if their buses could come into there. That's something that we think would be more preferable for customers, of that they would get a door-to-door service.
But you're going to sign for the maybe less than optimal situation, and then if they revise it, you're going to re-sign again?
Go ahead, and then I'll jump in.
I think one of the sort of good byproducts of this program is actually that we are having those conversations with the service board. So as we get to know them, as Kevin is more involved in some of these sort of operational things, we start to foster the relationship such that they're calling him up and saying, hey, we're going to be moving these stops, or they're having this sort of common sense sort of, wait, would it be easier just to move the Pace bus stop kind of conversations?
So those conversations are going
they
on.
They do occur, but also take into mind, and maybe Director Ross might want to give you a tour of the magnitude of the scope of what's happening out at Joliet. This is not just, they just didn't choose to move a station or move a bus stop. It's not taking a pole and sticking it down the street further. I mean, this is a massive redevelopment. I actually got a tour out there and moving tracks, overpasses. It's a huge thing. And as part of that, Joliet's doing a whole section of a downtown redevelopment. So this is a massive project. And in many cases, like I said, it's not just picking up a pole and sticking a Pace bus. Sometimes they actually have other, curb cuts and other more bus bay turnarounds, things like that. And so it's not a simple thing as just saying we're just going to move it a block closer. There might be other traffic control and other restrictions that are causing that dictates that the bus can't actually be moved, because those common sense conversations are occurring. But in some cases, moving something 2 blocks and putting the signs to get you there is actually the best, most efficient, and cost-effective way of doing things.
And Director, let me just jump in that the end game of that is PACE will get a new bus terminal there, which actually is the end game of where then the signs come in. But again, it's 2 years. We just can't leave people to wander the streets to make the connections for 2 years, and that's what we're doing with this project.
My concern wasn't specifically about Joliet, but that common sense conversations were going on as we evaluate each of the 19 sites that you're looking at for this signage. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on item 7? If not, yes, Director DeWitt.
I'm gonna jump in here with my colleague, Mr. Colson. $40,000 per location. The little bit of knowledge I have about exterior signage, that sounds like an awful lot of money, especially given the $500,000 that's already been invested in this process. I'm not opposed to the project. I understand the concept and the reason for implementing it. I guess I'd feel a little bit better knowing exactly what we're going to be getting for $40,000 for each, roughly $40,000 for each of these 19 locations.
Let me add, Director, that's the average. And the average of this project is skewed because included in this is Union Station, LaSalle Street Station, Ogilvie Transportation Center, and Millennium. Those are the ones that skew it because we're talking an average of 50 to 60 signs in those locations. That's our estimate right now. And tying into what Director Hobson said, and we're pushed those out actually because there's too many projects going on. There's some projects going on downtown, so that we've pushed off those to the end when I mentioned the bundle 1. So when we're talking about the cost per station, your lower stations like Waukegan, they're not going to be that expensive on a per sign basis, on an engineering basis. I mean, at Waukegan, we're talking about maybe 2 to 3 signs in the station, maybe about 4 to 5 signs outside the station. The rest are the inexpensive, putting a pole in the ground and putting something on the sign. It's actually the larger ones that skew it.
And the firms are really offering more than just literally design. I mean, they're doing site visits, they're doing the design, they're putting together the PS&E packages, they're helping us review them, they're out there doing construction oversight. So it's more than just putting in the permits, everything that's basically required to design and oversee these. They're taking in the liability of them, too, so they're making sure, like Kevin said, that when there's wind or things like that, that nothing's falling on anybody. So
if the I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
So if the bottom end of the project scope is a 3x4 metal sign on a metal post, what's the opposite end of that cost spectrum? Is it 6x8 foot lighted signage in 2 of the metro stations?
The opposite end is, and I showed this to one of Director Colson, what we termed when we designed them the stainless steel monsters, as we call it. They're approximately maybe 11 feet long by about maybe with 2 platforms, 2 stands, and approximately about maybe 3 feet high, because they have to accommodate, these are the largest ones, and they're stainless steel, which they last. We worked with the service boards on getting these specs on this because they include a bus connection map, which shows all the PACE and CTA routes, a train connection map, which shows all of the, which is a system map for CTA and Metro routes. They include a Metro timetable, and with the bus connections, it will include also, the bus connections includes a spider map showing you where the routes go with major destinations and timetables. So the largest sign, and those are on Metro platforms. So then the cost of that, so when we're talking design costs, that's the largest one that we would have to design that for actually having wind load and actually fitting on Metro platforms, of which different Metro platforms, some are in the ground, some are elevated, and there are different materials.
Is there a list available of the individual scopes for each of these locations?
Yes.
Provide that to you if you're interested in drilling down to that level of detail. Yeah.
And are we under any legal requirement to install any of these signs at this point? Is there anything forcing us to move this along rapidly as opposed to?
Well, if we don't, we'll have to, I mean, this is federal funding that we have a grant for. I mean, if we don't do it, we give back the money.
Okay. If we were to put this off for 30 days so we could get a look at the scope of work per location, would that create any heartburn?
No. We can provide that to you today. They can copy this afternoon.
The scope's the same for all the locations, but we can get you the breakdown of what the hours were in the contract. I believe.
In the contract, right.
For each of the sites,
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to take a shot at a motion to table this item for 30 days, subject to provision of a scope of labor for each location.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Let's just, Leanne, let's just withdraw this item and put it back on next month. Okay?
And we'll, in the meantime, we'll get out electronically offline from the board meeting more detail around the scope of work and the locations, et cetera.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Item 8 is a special action item. It's the Union Station redevelopment resolution. Leanne touched on it in her report. But Leanne, what else do you have to add to the resolution?
Nothing, as I indicated. It's just sort of our preliminary indication of interest and support for the project in advance of us bringing a more formal action to the board.
Thank you. This is a resolution that just is out there for our public statement that we support working with the mayor, Amtrak, Metra on the redevelopment of what ought to be a crown jewel. Union Station, the mayor's office is very, very much, including, I believe the mayor himself has had a meeting with Amtrak, and this just expresses our support. I think everybody's read it, and so if there are no questions on it, can I have a motion and a second? We adopt this resolution? Yes.
I do have one question about source of funds. Is this a regularly budgeted item coming out of the general fund, or where is the source of funds on this?
So we do have the monies budgeted. What we are looking to tap for this, and we've discussed this with the service boards, some of you probably recall a couple of years back there was a few settlements from some federal settlements for some bond deals Antitrust, thank you, I needed that. Settlements. We weren't actually party to those lawsuits, but we were beneficiaries of some of those settlements. I think you might recall we got about 1.5 from JP Morgan Chase and then a couple of other relatively smaller settlements. We'd set those funds aside with an eye on sort of spending them on capital type projects, and we thought that this might be a good opportunity to tap 1.5 out of those monies that wasn't allocated for anything else at this point to support this regional effort.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Director, you have a motion or question?
No, I'd like to, I'm for the 1.5 million allocation of funds for Union Station, but I'd like to know more about the proposed redevelopment of the station, and I would hope that the board would be kept abreast of what is proposed by the mayor or whoever is going to.
Absolutely. I mean, once we're engaged with this project, we'll be keeping you up to speed. Additionally, I can also pull together the overarching master plan that we collectively all put together and maybe share that through a board briefing to board members.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we're a long way from Tipperary on this one, but it's important that we have regional consensus and get rolling on this. Director Fuentes?
Make a motion.
Phil moves that we adopt the Union Station resolution, seconded by Director Pang. Is there leave for the attendance roll call on that? Seeing no objection, leave is granted. And
13 ayes and 1 absent.
hopefully we'll see a beautiful ribbon cutting someday on Union Station. So that is adopted. Is there any new business to come before the board? Seeing
Mr.
none.
Chairman, I just
Yes,
have one quick
yes, sir.
question.
Director
This
Melvin.
is probably my fault. Leanne, on the procurement report, it's $530,000 spent. I wasn't here last meeting, so it's probably my fault. I just wondered, the $530,000 that's spent on the procurement report from July 24th, Friedman and Company. Friedman. Just wondered if. Okay, great. It was on an August 18th procurement report email. I just hadn't seen it before. I was just wondering.
Oh, that's a procurement that's out. I actually have. Let me look into that and tell you what exactly that is. I know that was something we sent via email. It's just a standard report that we send out. Off the top of my head, it's not. I know the company, but I can't remember exactly what they were doing.
Great. We'll get that to you, Director Melvin. Okay. I want to remind everybody that the next RTA board meeting is Thursday, September 10th, starting with committees at 8:30 and followed by the board meeting. If there's no further business to come before the board, Director Colson moves we adjourn, seconded by Director Totten, and all those in favor signify by leaving. Thank you all very much.